Generally speaking, you want to update your recovery charges. Since most of us, or at least half of us, if not more, did not use Yardi to calculate your recoveries for 2025, calculations that Yardi does may not tie to your own calculations, and that's totally fine. You're just going to override the numbers. So we're going to go to lease administration, recoveries, update recovery estimates. This says restricted, not because if you can see this, you can't access it, but so that you know if you get to it and you cannot access it, it's because it is restricted for some users. The reason I do this is so that I have fewer menus to maintain, because every time we make a change, every time I add a custom report, every time we add a new feature, I have to update all the menus. And as you can see, that's a lot of places to update. So to try and minimize that, I try and put everything on menus whenever possible so that you can get to it, so that there's often multiple ways for you to get to things. Although in this case, there's not. This is something that you have to go to through this menu. Okay, lease administration, recoveries, update recovery estimate. This same method, let's say you signed a new lease and they started November 1st and you wanted to go ahead and get them set up and get their rent charged, but you didn't yet know what their recovery numbers were going to be. As long as you put 0 lines on their lease and attach the recovery settings, at least some generic high-level recovery settings, you can use the same menu to later update their charges. So in this case, I'm just going to use the property I've been working on for testing. So if you were just updating one lease, like I say, let's say tenant moved in June, maybe they had concessed everything for a month or two, you didn't know what their final numbers were going to be, and now you need to update their charges, you would put their lease ID in here. So you can do all tenants or you can do one tenant. If you need to do a mix, I'll show you how to do that. We're going to hit submit. The first thing we're going to put in is the new date. For 2025, obviously that's going to be 01/01/25, but it could be any date that you need to change the charges. So for example, in the middle of the year, maybe your tax bill finally, is finalized and it's way higher than you were anticipating. And we want to bill back the tenants a little bit more so that we don't have such a big true up. This could be 07/01/25. It's whatever date the charges will change as of. The expense year in is the related expense year in. So it's always December. In this case, it'll be 12/25. Books, right now, if you're updating from your budget that is loaded, it is currently sitting in pro forma book. If you were doing this for a new tenant and you wanted to use actuals, you would use accrual. Once we move the budget from pro forma to accrual, then you'll use accrual. And next year, when we're using the budget module, depending on timing, you will either use the budget that's loaded into your financials, or ironically, if you are needing to update from the budget that's still in the budget module, it's considered actuals. It's kind of confusing, but it is considered actuals because it's a separate module and it considers the work in that module to be, let's just call it actual work. So it considers it actual financials. You don't have to worry about that this year. We're looking at the budget. We're going to put in pro forma. If this will be true anytime, whether you're updating from a budget that's loaded or from the budget module next year. Sorry, not increase percentage, occupancy override. If you have gross ups, if you don't have gross ups, this doesn't matter. And I have seen a few gross ups, but only a handful. If you have gross ups and your budgeted occupancy is different than your actual occupancy in Yardi, you will need to put your occupancy in the budget here. So let's say your actual occupancy is 75%, but your budgeted occupancy was 85%. That's affecting your gross up. So you need to put in 85% there. If you wanted to update one group at a time, this particular property doesn't have a whole lot of tenants, but let's say you had a whole lot of tenants and you wanted to restrict it, you could put in just CAM and update CAM, and then tax and update tax, and then insurance and update insurance. For now, I'm just going to hit calculate. and it's going to pull in all my tenants. You can see we have CAM, insurance, and tax. If I just want to see CAM, I'm going to put in CAM here and then click calculate again. And now I'm just going to see my CAM. So maybe it's a little less overwhelming. If you have a lot of tenants, it will time out on you. So do be mindful of that. The other thing, if you were doing a flat increase, that's what this field is for. I don't like using this revised billing box. Obviously, if you get the charges updated before January charges are billed, you don't need it. But if you're updating in the middle of the year, I don't like using the revised billing box. The batch it creates is probably correct, but it nets everything together. It's much easier to run revised billing so you can visually confirm it's reversing out these charges and then reposting these charges. It's a lot easier to follow, in my opinion. The revised billing batch that these creates, I've just never found anybody who could follow it easily. So now let's say I was working through and I had all these leases and I wasn't confident I would be able to update them all at once. You can use this box for two things. One, maybe there's a tenant you don't want to update. Then you can check the box so you don't update them. The other thing you can do is use it to work through all your leases. So in this case, I am in test, so I'm just going to update these to some random numbers. We'll say 150 and now I've updated these three, so I'm going to uncheck these boxes. I'm going to click update lease, and those are going to disappear, and it's only going to leave me my remaining tenants. So if you have a lot of tenants, you can work through this way by just updating a few at a time and clicking update lease. They will all disappear as you do this until you're complete. That being said, if I leave this menu and go back, it's going to repopulate everything. One of the most common things I find confuses people is they go back in and they expect to see the new charges that they've just updated. But it's not going to be the new charges because those aren't in place as of the date that it's pulling the data for, okay? It's always going to be the charges that are in place the day before this new date. So you can't come back into here to see that the updates have been made. You'd have to go and run a tenancy schedule. So let's just update a couple more. Update lease. And so now there are no charges left. But if I go back into the same screen and put in the same information, it's going to repopulate all the tenants. And you can see the numbers that I overrode to are not here. So I've had people go in and reperform this task multiple times because they think it's not being updated. It is being updated. It's just repopulating the data that was in place the day before this new start date. So if we want to see the new charges, we're going to go to analytics. I like the tenancy schedule, but you may have a different report that you like. Put in your new date. I don't want to see future, but I do want to see my charge schedules. And then you can scroll down and you can see that you have new charges in place starting 01/01/25. That's typically what you're scanning for. If you've updated them, then you should have new charges starting with that new date. And if every tenant has those, then you're pretty much golden. You have updated everything. Obviously, if you want to actually, and you probably should, confirm all the numbers came through correctly, you can, but you can see these that I updated with the round numbers and these that I just pushed through with the not round numbers. So that is how to update the charges for 2025. Do we have any questions about that before I move on?
Angela, yes, I do.
Yes.
For Herndon Parkway, I updated my charges this morning, but there were a couple of tenants where the insurance amount did not pull. And I
Okay.
looked back at the Excel and the amounts were on the recoveries, but for some reason it wasn't pulling. So how
So
do I
the,
add those charges
okay.
to the tenant?
So there's two things to check. One, go in and look at the lease and make sure they have a recovery group. I realize they calculated, so they should have a recovery group, but just confirm that they have a recovery group for insurance.
Mhm.
And then the second thing is sometimes for some reason they get hard coded with an end date. Make sure that end date is the lease end date because you won't be able to update anything if the charge doesn't exist as of the first. Okay. So if somebody has, and this was something I really had to train people to stop doing, but if your charges have an end date on them, they won't pull in because they don't exist as of the first, if that makes sense.
It does.
So I can fix that for you if that's what's happened. But it's very common. People are like, well, this charge only goes to the end of December, so they hard code that to end at the end of December. The problem is you then can't update it. And the other problem is that if you don't get them updated, then it won't charge them that for January anyway. So I typically train people to never put end dates on those charge codes. But that's the second most common thing that's happened is the charge code has been hard coded. So the calculations will still run because they're still in place, but the charge code has been ended. So it's not pulling in. And I can just reset that charge code for you as well.